Hi everyone, my name is Keaney and I was asked to do a video contribution for this PEAI Teachmeet based around bringing theory into our practice across the curricula. In particular, how can we bring theory, I suppose, over to the PE hall? And I'm going to be looking at an example for junior cycle and an example that will work for both senior cycle PE and Leaving Cert PE. So the first example I'm going to talk about is from the junior cycle. And in particular, I'm going to look at how can we start drip feeding some content to prepare for CBA 1. With CBA 1 being where we look at the physical activity for the health and enjoyment for our students. And I suppose one of the biggest things that we need to, debunk or demystify for a lot of our students at the very beginning is this idea of, well, what is health? What is fitness? And what exactly can this CBA can be completed on. So one of the first activities that I normally would do over in the hall when I'm preparing for the CBA is this idea of who's the fittest. Now, if you don't have a projector in your PE hall, I tend to sometimes just write these different sports or activities up on the board, whether that's sprinter, darts player, snooker, gymnast, dancer, etc. And you can tailor it to your own school. You'll know your students on what sports and activities that they know and what those that they can engage with. But I then would normally ask them to rank these in order of fittest from top to bottom. So most fittest to least fittest. And they have to be able to provide a rationale for their choices. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of the time they can tend to jump on the bandwagon a little bit and hear other groups of what they're choosing. But very often, you're just trying to get an idea of who do they consider the fittest. Oftentimes, they'll start up the top with your sprinters, boxers, dancers, etc. And those that will be down towards the bottom tend to be your dart players or your snooker players or so on. And the whole idea, I suppose, of what I'm trying to do here at the beginning of this lesson is they need to get a concept or get an idea of fit for what. And I suppose that's the big element that I'm trying to get them to understand. For us, a lot of the time, fitness may be how they look, how they are perceived by others, or the idea of, well, someone's fit if they can run for the bus or if they can run for a long period of time. And that's the element that they deem to be fitness. So I suppose the next part of the introduction to the lesson is exposing them to these ideas of the components of fitness. And the idea that we have components of fitness for health, so I tend to just have health and then performance written up, and that we would need these for different times in our lives. So your health you need right from when you're younger all the way up to, I get them to think of their granny and granddad or older people. And then the idea of performance is getting better for your sport or activity that you might train or play on the weekend. And after I explain through what kind of the simple enough means of what each of these components are, I asked them then to think back to fit for what. And if I was then asked them to rank, okay, what do you think is the person or the activity that would have the greatest flexibility or best flexibility to worst? And then a lot of the time they'll have their gymnast and dancer up the top, or we might then ask power. And when they re-rank them, they can start to understand, okay, different sports or different activities that they might enjoy actually have different things that can be ranked higher in terms of need. And with the idea of this then is to expose them or provide them with some then opportunities to understand how to experience flexibility training, muscular strength, coordination, and so on by in this lesson and then subsequent lessons afterwards. My idea is to set up drills or activities that would allow them to understand how they could, through maybe different games or different activities, improve balance, power, speed, and so on. So a lot of the games and activities might have one or another focus, and their assessment criteria for those activities is, can you identify one or more of the components of fitness, whether they be health or performance related, that this activity or game was trying to work on? And hopefully then by the time that they come around to create their own plan for their CBA, they have a bank and an idea and an experience of different activities that might work on some of the different components. Then for my second example, I want to try and have something that could work for both an LCP and an SCP lesson. So I looked at in particular from the health related activity model that around diet and nutrition. Diet nutrition is something that's a hot topic within our school. I'm sure it is the same across the board. And with a lot of our senior cycle students not necessarily making the best food or diet decisions. So this is an activity that I do a lot with my Leaving Cert P, but also with my senior cycle in the last couple of years. And it's what's in the fridge. So the idea is we set up our fictitious fridge in the center of the PE hall. And in the middle of the PE hall are several laminated cutouts of different foodstuffs with the barcodes. Now, the barcodes can be used if you have access to, say, digital devices. A lot of the time when you scan them, it can give you like macro breakdowns and so on. But an activity that I'm currently getting some of my TY students to work on is creating a bit of a bank of the food cards that might have some macros on them, or getting labels and laminating them to be able to use in both the home ec department and also in the PE department. But basically the game is this. Set up 4 to 6 teams, depending on the size of your group, and you give each of those teams a different scenario. So the scenarios might be: you're running late for school. What are you going to be able to grab? You've matched this evening. What are some of the ideas, or what are some of the macronutrients that you will need to think about before you play? You've just played a match, or you've just done a gym session. What are some of the foods, or what might be a good meal plan or meal for you to choose to recover from that gym session? Each of them have a different one, and then you get them to have a little 2 to 3 minute idea about what might be some ideal food choices, and then we turn it into a relay race. So students will run from their respective cones into the center, into the fridge, and they have to make kind of a snap decision on what would be the best food at that time. We keep playing until either their food runs out or each of the groups is happy with the food that they've chosen. And then we go around and we then evaluate what their food choice was. So they bring their food into the center circle, and each of them then have to describe why they chose what they chose, and do they think that it will be a good meal for their scenario. And then you can extend this on in loads of different ways. You can do barter or buy, where they can swap, or if they recognize that there's an ingredient that they really want from another team, they can swap it in or explain why they need it and so on. But it was something that has been very beneficial, and a lot of students have, I suppose, been able to use these skills in their everyday life then to try and make that best decision if they are running late for school, or if they have a match later on that they might need to leave the can of Monster at home, or maybe not have the shipper at lunchtime if they're playing a match that night.